Hi, my name is Dr. Rich Hillsden, and you're watching my channel, Knife Skills. Today, I want to talk about criticism. A lot of the people who watch my channel are med students, residents, really people who are inspiring to achieve something professionally. And anyone who has an ambition, a big goal, needs to learn to deal with criticism. If you were to ask me, I would tell you I absolutely hate criticism. And when I was younger, I really tried to live with this mantra that I don't care what people think. I want to focus on my mission, my goals, my objectives, and not be tied down by arbitrary feelings of other people's criticism and ideas of how I'm performing and what I should be doing. But the reality is that we live in a world that involves interacting with people, and criticism is going to be there, and we all care about how we are perceived. If you're someone who posts on social media, especially if you're posting on something like TikTok or YouTube, where there's a big imbalance between those who consume the content and those that create it, at least as far as how many people actually are active creators versus someone who is a consumer, you're definitely aware of criticism. You're aware of how many likes, follows, shares, and the comments for sure. And so being inoculated, I want to say, against criticism that's not useful for you is an important skill to have. And likewise, someone who's aspiring to be a professional or successful needs to have a good set of skills to deal with the criticism that are inevitably going to come. So today I wanted to give you more or less 6 tips that you as an aspiring professional or medical student can use to really handle criticism that you're inevitably going to receive. So the first tip is acceptance. Know, first of all, that criticism is going to happen. It's a part of being a professional. If you're a doctor or anyone who is in the community providing an impact, you are definitely going to get criticism. It's just part of the deal. It's part of being a professional, without a doubt. One way to think about this is an analogy in surgery. We use the expression, only surgeons who don't operate don't get complications. So obviously for surgery, a complication is the outcome that we try to avoid. We hate complications. We want our patients to do well. But the very act of doing surgery has some risks. In the same way, anything that you do that has impact is going to be subject to criticism. And so criticism is the risk of getting out there and doing something impactful. So you should take the criticism that you're getting as evidence that you're doing something that's meaningful and impactful. So it's important to accept that criticism is going to happen. The next point I want to mention is know that it's going to be emotional. For you as someone receiving criticism, you're definitely going to feel emotions. If you're invested in all of what you're doing, if you're creating something, if you're working towards something, if you have ambitious goals, criticism can feel like a threat to that. So you're going to feel emotions. And also know that the person giving you the criticism is likely experiencing some emotions as well. If you think about someone who's depressed, that's someone who doesn't have really much in the way of positive emotions. They're kind of in a lower, flatter state. They have a hard time actually doing much, getting up and making the bed or going throughout the day because they just don't have that emotional charge to get them going. Well, know that criticism is the same way. Someone needs to feel emotionally charged enough to give you the criticism in order for it to come out. So know they're experiencing emotions themselves. And that's sometimes why criticism can feel a little bit uncomfortable or a little bit intense because there's always that emotional element. So know it's emotional. So let's move on to another tip. And the third one is find for yourself, is it useful? So some people will break criticism down into constructive and non-constructive criticism. And I personally don't find that dichotomy very useful for a number of reasons. First of all, even the most unconstructive criticism can have a use. There's something you can action from it potentially. And let me give you an example. When I was a medical student and I was doing my internal medicine rotation, it was quite demanding. And at that time, there wasn't as much call protection. As a medical student, we were up most of the night and we'd have to work into the next day. And I remember my preceptor saying, you know, Rich, you don't handle fatigue very well. You struggle with working while tired. Now, of course, how useful is that? All of us struggle when we're tired. That's the nature of human existence. But I could find something useful from that in the end because she was perceiving my performance as being impacted by fatigue. And that's important to know. And we'll talk about how to deal with that in the future. Some criticism, of course, has a genuine motivation to make you better and has more actionable characteristics to it. And that's great. When you receive that type of criticism and it's done in an emotionally appropriate way, that's fantastic, and use that as much as you can. So let's move on to the next point. Is the criticism actionable? So again, whether the criticism is constructive or not, there may be something you can action from it. If you think back to my example, I couldn't stop myself from being tired. I wanted to be a surgeon. I wanted to work in trauma, maybe in the emergency department. I knew I was going to be working in an environment where sleep was going to be impacted. There's going to be times where I'm at work tired. It was going to happen. So I wasn't going to be able to prevent myself from being fatigued, but I could maybe prevent myself from being perceived as being less effective when I'm tired. I could maybe develop some skills and adaptations so that if I was tired, I could perform better. And so there was something useful even in that unconstructive criticism. And I think for the most part, you can always find that silver lining. You always find something within that criticism that can help you perform better. So think, is it useful? The next point I want to talk about is, have you heard the criticism before? So this helps you decide again on the validity of the criticism, because sometimes you'll hear a suggestion or something and it might be in conflict with what your belief system is, or it might be in conflict with what you perceive your goals to be, or maybe it just seems strange. Pay attention to how many times you've heard that criticism before. Again, if you're out there, you're participating in the world, you're doing something impactful, you're trying to make a difference, you've got a admirable goal, you're going to get criticism. And so the more things you do, the more criticism you're going to get, the easier it will be for you to say, hey, am I seeing the same criticism over and over again? Am I getting the same thing? If I'm getting the same feedback, maybe I can do something about it. So figure out, are you getting this criticism more than once? And the final point I want to leave you with is, don't worry too much about the source. So often people will say, consider the source when you're talking about feedback. But I actually think that's not that useful. The reality is that anyone in any position can feel vulnerable. Your boss, maybe your subordinates, regardless of where they're at, they can feel impacted by the work you're doing, impacted by the things you're doing in a way that makes them feel insecure or vulnerable. So no matter who they are in your life, there's a chance that they might feel emotionally about the situation rather than providing you with useful and constructive feedback. Focus on those other things. Is there something useful? Is there something actionable? Have I heard this before? And spend less time focusing on where it comes from. Having mentors is great. Having people who've been there before is great. But if their feedback doesn't pass that test of usefulness, of actionable, and of consistency or repeatable, have you heard it before? Then it's not that useful for you too, regardless of their status. It's always exciting to hear from people in my channel who are ambitious, people who talk about wanting to get into medicine and wanting to have a medical career. And I'm really making these videos for you. I'm really making these videos for people who have goals. And I felt today that I wanted to talk about criticism. So I'd love to hear any comments you have in the chat below about how you handle criticism, some experiences you might have. Really, I'm trying to build a community here and support people. So also please like and subscribe. Again, I appreciate every view, every like, every share. It makes for a great experience sharing this content with you. Have a great day.